Hello, my name is Paul Michaud. I'm the CEO of Proceve, and in this video, we're actually going to talk about some of the capabilities we've built into our software to help you better plan your project and all of the different artifacts within it. In any given project, we have a ton of artifacts that we're tracking, whether that's requirements, objectives, documents, tasks, tests, issues, milestones, you name it, right? There is a lot of artifacts, and every one of them needs to be scheduled and planned and prioritized, and you name it. There's just an awful lot to do around this. And keeping track of all of this and making sure things get done in the right way is a critical part of any kind of project or program management. And in recognizing that, we've gone to great lengths to make sure that there is a lot of capabilities inherent in our software to allow you to do just that and to plan and manage these things. And today we're going to talk specifically about some of the items directly pertaining to just the planning aspect of it, or a piece of the planning, at least the scheduling and prioritization aspects of the planning. And we'll cover other aspects of planning such as estimation, resource management, etc. in a separate video, since it's a sufficiently large topic in its own right. So if we look at an artifact, for every artifact type, there are things associated with it. We have planning items related to assignment. For example, I can assign a particular artifact to be worked on by a team. That artifact could be a task, a requirement, whatever. And I can say, hey, this team is doing this part of the project, and I can actually have it assigned to that team. In addition, I can actually assign it to a specific user. I can assign it in time if I'm using sprints in my project planning to a particular sprint or potentially to a particular release target or candidate. In addition, if I'm doing work from an assignment standpoint, I might assign it against a particular charge code. Maybe my project or part of the project is for a specific department or a client or whatever. And if your company uses charge codes, then we can associate charge codes, for example, against every single artifact in the system and track time against it. In addition, we can assign deadlines to any artifact. Also, we can prioritize them. So I want to know what's the criticality of the item? Is it high, medium, low? Is it something I don't really care about? It's kind of nice to have and I'll get to it when I get to it. So that's one of the things that you could look at. In addition, we can set an explicit priority. So I might have two items, both are high priority, but does one need to get done before the other, right? Not just in the sense of a dependency standpoint. Sometimes the dependency dictates I have to do item A before item B, but the reality is maybe I've got two things with identical criticality. I've got similar resourcing, but the reality is I really think one item should get done slightly before the other, and I can define the priority associated with it. In our case, we actually allow you to set the priority using a numerical scale, and for us internally at Proceve, we generally sort of say, okay, things with a lower number are higher priority, but if you want to have things with a higher number be higher priority, you can do that. The software doesn't care on that. It allows you to customize it. And we actually allow the numbers to be either positive or negative. So sometimes internally for us, we have something that we said, okay, this is the top priority. We set it to a 1 or something. But then something comes along and it's like, you know what, that thing that I thought was the highest priority, I've actually got this other thing that's slightly higher, so I'm going to make it a 0. Or maybe I need to make it -1 or even -10, so that I can see that, oh, this actually is more important than anything else. Because often we can't anticipate what's going to come down the pipe in a big project. And if I want that fine-grained control on stuff, then I can actually use those priorities to set it. Finally, separate from the priority, I could have two things that are both priority 1, and I may need to then turn around and say, you know what, but I want to do one before the other, even though their priority is exactly the same. So in addition to having the priority, the criticality, etc., we also allow you on every single artifact to specify the desired to-do order. And later on, we can talk about, in another video I'm sure we'll get to, when you actually have a to-do item sitting in an actual user's list of items that are assigned to them, we actually allow them to specify not only the global project to-do item, but we allow them to actually adjust their personal to-do order relative to those same items. And all of this is available from a planning perspective. In addition, when we assign something to a sprint, it's worth looking at sort of what the software provides for dealing with sprints as it pertains to planning. So in every project, you can define a set of sprints. And so we have this thing called a sprint set. And in the sprint set, you can specify, well, what's the duration of the sprint? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 days? You can make it whatever you want. The default is set to 14 working days or 2 calendar weeks. In addition, if you tell us what the start of the first sprint is, and we associate that with the set, and that could be the start of your project or whatever you want when you're building a particular set of sprints. Also, if you tell us how many sprints you want. So for example, if I think I want to plan a year ahead, I can say I want my duration set to 14 days. I want the start of the first sprint to be today, and I want the total number of sprints to be 26. And what's going to happen is our software will automatically go and create you 26 sprints of 2 weeks duration starting today and going for 1 year. And you'll get this whole set of sprints that get defined. Each sprint, then has properties of their own. For example, you can assign every sprint a name. When we generate the sprints, it actually uses the name of the set. So if I have sprint set A, then it'll be sprint set A, sprint 1 will be the first name, sprint set A, sprint 2 by default. But you can, whatever you name your sprint, it'll get incorporated, but then you can come back and change the name if you want. In addition, you can actually set the description, which is completely optional on each sprint separately. A lot of people are probably not going to do this, but if you want to, you can. Again, the sprint will have a duration. By default, the duration of the sprint is going to be the same as what it's supposed to be for every sprint in the sprint set. So normally people aren't going to set this. We do allow you to manipulate it, but generally it's not recommended and it'll be set by default. Each sprint is going to have a start date. Again, if you define the sprint set, the start date of the sprint will be set automatically by our software for you when it creates the set of sprints. Each sprint will correspondingly have an end date associated with it. And we typically associate a number with it as well. So sprint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. in the set. We also have this concept of a data record for a team sprint. And so typically what's going to happen is the team sprint is associated with a particular team, and it also links into the global set of sprints so that you don't have a case where every team defined their own sprints. They may or may not start on the same day. I know when I use Jira, this is always a frustration that in theory you can do that and every team can have their own sprints and they can call them whatever they want and they don't align. In our system, there's a global set of sprints for the entire project and each team can link into it. But in addition, what I can do for each team is I can track additional data relative to the team. For example, the most obvious ones, if I'm using story points as my estimation technique, I can actually decide, hey, this team for this sprint is targeting to achieve this many story points worth of development, and we use that for planning. In addition, after the fact, I can potentially come back and associate with that team sprint record and say, well, how many actual story points of work did they actually get done? And we track this in the team sprint, and it's associated with the specific sprints. So for example, this allows us to say, okay, across all teams in my project, how many story points were achieved by all teams in this specific sprint. And because we align them all up and they're all associated with a single sprint instance across all teams within the same project, then that kind of analysis becomes possible. In addition, we can actually sort of compare, okay, here's what we thought we would do, here's what we actually achieved, etc. And later on, it provides for a lot of analysis capabilities.